Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Iansan is out now and you're probably wondering how to use her and who the heck to use her with. In this video, I went Iansane and decided to test Iansan with 15 of the most popular attack scaling DPS characters to give you all an idea of who she works with and who she doesn't, both at Constellation 0 and at Constellation 6. This video was filmed on the early access server, so things might change on her release. And this video won't have as much editing because I just want to get this information out there to you guys to help you decide if Iansan is even worth it for your account or not, since I've had some time to test her. In case you aren't aware, Iansan provides some very substantial attack buffs and is also capable of equipping the Cinder City set. And while she's very solid for certain teams at Constellation 0, she gets significantly better with her constellations. Although I was actually surprised by the real impact of her constellations, and it might not be what you'd expect. Now, what really sets her apart from Bennett, the broken baseline for attack buffers, is that instead of playing Circle Impact, you're playing Fitness Impact with Iansan. As what's important for Iansan is how much your character moves. This won't be a full guide on her, that will probably, hopefully, come out tomorrow or so, but basically the way that she works is that you use her elemental skill, then you usually do her charged attack kick, and then you can use her burst. After she uses her burst, her attack buff is based on how many Night Soul points she has. And the goal for Iansan is to generally keep her above 42 out of her 54 Night Soul points, as the buff scales by 27% of her attack stat for the active character instead of half a percent times her Night Soul points, so 21% or less effectively while she's under 42 Night Soul points. Fortunately, Hoyoverse added a visual indicator for if you're over 42 Night Soul points, as it shows up as this little Iansan rooting for you icon, whereas if you're under 42 Night Soul points, it shows this little skull/mask icon as Iansan is disappointed in your fitness levels. And in order to stay over 42 Night Soul points, Iansan gains Night Soul points based on how much your character moves, whether that's horizontal or vertical movement. If you move, it counts as a workout, and she'll generate around 2/3 of a Night Soul point for each meter your character has moved. Let's take a quick look at the buffs that she provides. At Constellation 0, she provides 690 attack at burst level 10, and in this video she's providing 650 attack because she's a talent level 9. She's a great user of the Cinder City set, which provides 40% elemental damage. She also provides a very small amount of healing, and at Constellation 2 she provides 30% attack. And at Constellation 5, this gives her 3 levels to her elemental burst, which means her max buff is now 810 attack. And at Constellation 6, she gives you 25% bonus damage for 3 seconds if you can overfill her Night Soul points. Speaking of overfilling her Night Soul points, her Constellation 4 helps out a bit with this, as if she overflows any Night Soul points over her max, she will gain 50% of that overflow the next time she restores Night Soul points during her elemental burst, which she restores once every second. And she'll also gain an additional 8 Night Soul points if you use the character's elemental burst after you use Iansan's burst. This one's a bit complicated, but yeah, basically know that her Constellation 4 improves her Night Soul point regeneration. Let's take a quick look at how much she can buff. In this clip, we can see Iansan, if she's the activator for Cinder City and able to maintain her buff, which is essentially one of her ideal circumstances. Iansan at Constellation 0 is able to buff Varesa about as much as a noblesse obliged Constellation 5 Bennett with the Sapwood Blade, with both of them in this case buffing Varesa by around 42%. This is actually very impressive considering we're talking about a Constellation 5 Bennett here. Now this next clip is what if we start adding some of Iansan's constellations. This jumps to a 55% buff, and with Constellation 5's 120 additional flat attack, as well as Constellation 6's 25% bonus damage, now Varesa is doing around 74% more damage, which is, well, frankly, a lot. And for Varesa specifically, we can see that once you throw in some constellations, Iansan, there's no competition between her and Bennett, and all Bennett can really offer at this point is more healing. Anyway, Iansan's exact mechanics for generating Night Soul points don't matter too much, because ultimately the most important thing is how compatible are specific characters with Iansan's buffs. That takes us to all 15 characters that I tested her with, and some of these tests I even redid at Constellation 6 because I am Iansan. So I decided to pick 15 of the most popular attack scaling characters, with a few that I skipped due to what I think are reasonable reasons, like Yae Miko not wanting to be on field, and any self-respecting child player not using international is pretty crazy, not gonna lie. And quick disclaimer, the gameplay here is far from optimal, and this is just an initial test for compatibility. It's likely that tons of optimization will be discovered as time goes on, so please take this with a grain of salt, but I figured one guy's testing is better than no testing in terms of giving you all at least an introduction to what Iansan can do and for who. There are a few things to keep in mind for this test. At Constellations 3 and below, we mainly care about whether she can stay above 42 Night Soul points. And at Constellation 6, we'll see if the team can fulfill its conditions, which are if the on-field character can overflow some of Iansan's Night Soul points, so push her over the 54 max Night Soul points, and regularly to maintain that 25% bonus damage buff for Constellation 6. And lastly, my slime rating for each DPS plus Iansan is ultimately my opinion, but I base it on compatibility while maintaining Iansan's buff, whether Iansan can utilize the Cinder City, whether the DPS can maintain Iansan's Constellation 6 buff, and finally if there are any large sacrifices in terms of team building. So yeah, basically just my opinion. Finally, don't pay any attention to the actual damage being dealt, because I intentionally neutered some builds and the builds on the media server just aren't good, so that way they won't kill the enemy too fast, and this is purely a test to see whether these characters can even maintain Iansan's buff. Alright, let's go through all of these tests, starting with Varesa. Now, needless to say, Varesa is perfect compatibility with Iansan because of her, plunge attacks, counting as moving both up and down. In this case, I actually didn't bother nerfing Varesa's build, so she easily took out the robot boss very, very quickly. Not a problem. Perfect synergy, both Cinder City and both with Night Soul points generation. And the next character is Mavuika, and this time in a melt team, but without, for example, Shilinin. Instead, we've kind of replaced Shilinin with Iansan, and not a problem. She will be able to keep Iansan capped out at 54 points, even at Constellation 0 Iansan, throughout the entire fight, or as long as you kind of do some donuts or perhaps, some dash attack strings. The next character is Kinich. I already kind of went over this in my last Iansan video. Needless to say, Iansan's working really well with the attack scalers from Natlin, Kinich included, being able to, move a ton during his, Night Soul burst thing where he swivels left and right and here and there, so able to cap out the buff. Now, next character is Gaming. We're reaching some non-Natlin DPS characters where also Iansan's Night Soul generation is a bit worse for them. But fortunately for Gaming, he is a plunge attacker, and you can even weave in some dashes here to actually travel more. But even without that, he's able to maintain Iansan's buff, and I think with a few more optimizations, he can definitely overcap it pretty easily for Constellation 6. Now, this next team is Chaska, who unsurprisingly also works quite well. And funny thing about Chaska though is that you actually, when I use Chaska, I often don't really move much at all. I just kind of like stay in one place aiming, but in this case, you can just kind of scoot around the enemy or wherever and bend its circle. You can move left and right if you want, bot just left and right, and you'll be able to maintain her buff like that. And the next character though is Xiao, and Xiao is interesting because even though he does maintain Iansan's Night Soul points at max pretty effortlessly, the bigger issue is who Iansan is replacing, and the issue is that Iansan cannot trigger Swirl and thus cannot proc the Cinder City. However, Iansan can buff, for example, Furina's damage on that team if that's something you want to do. Now the next character is Ayaka, and Iansan actually works decently well with Ayaka. And this applies to all characters that can really snapshot their damage, like even Xiangling or Fischl, for example. But basically, because Ayaka's damage is so front-loaded, she's able, even though she can't maintain the buff, like almost none of her damage output comes from her like charge attacks and whatever. It's almost all in the initial elemental burst, which she snapshots Iansan's burst just fine. So the next character is Hu Tao, and Hu Tao actually surprised me a bit. I was expecting her to not be able to maintain it that well, but I guess in hindsight, because Hu Tao dashes forward with her charge attack and she even jump cancels while she's at it, making her actually quite efficient for maintaining Iansan's Night Soul burst. But the bigger issue is that Iansan doesn't buff pyro damage with the Cinder City, so you're better off, I guess, just buffing the double Hydro damage with like Xingqiu and Yilan with the Cinder City instead, which works just fine. And the next character we have is Arlecchino. So Arlecchino more so has, I guess, a bit of a team building issue because you really have to replace Iansan or Bennett with Iansan, and Bennett, you know, he's just really good with pyro characters, but one major benefit of Iansan is obviously you're able to stay out of circle impact. But we can see here that the buff is dipping in and out, and we're able to keep it up for most of Arlecchino's infusion time, but not perfect. And with Constellation 6, because I want to revisit this for Arlecchino specifically, because maybe Iansan's Constellation 4 will make a big difference. And in this case, I would say it made a difference in terms of, like, for example, how much uptime you have on the max buff, but definitely not able to maintain Iansan's Constellation 6 buff. And one interesting thing is that you do want to kind of dash backwards with Arlecchino because she has decent forward momentum with her N1. So I was doing N3, kind of dash back, and then, you know, she kind of pokes back forward with her N1 here. So not the best synergy with Arlecchino, but decent, and I do think you will do noticeably less damage than with Bennett. However, you are free from circle impact, and it's just another option if you do need Bennett for the other team. Now, the next character is Clorinde, and Clorinde, upon initial, you know, impressions, you would think that she'd do really well, but actually she's basically standing still while she's doing the 3 shots before every skill. And yeah, we can see here that it's pretty when it comes to maintaining Iansan's buff. And I did decide to revisit this at Constellation 6 as well to see if her Constellation 4 would help. Okay, it did help maintain the regular buff, so maintain over 42 night soul points, but Clorinde doesn't seem to be able to overfill Iansan very easily, at least not for a substantial portion of the rotation. But hey, maybe with some other min-maxing here and there, somehow you are able to do it. Now, next we have Wriothesley, who you're gonna have to forgive my gameplay because I haven't used Constellation 0 Wriothesley in, I don't know, like a year now, whenever he was released. So yeah, anyway, it's okay, but not great. So I revisited it with Constellation 6, and it was much better with Constellation 6 because you're able to kind of change your rotations, and Mavuika is able to kind of help out there as well, thanks to her Night Soul points helping generate for Iansan. And there might be a couple moments here. It's a little hard to tell whether we were able to overfill Wriothesley or not. My initial impressions is I think we did have some uptime for that. Definitely a reasonable Bennett alternative, or I guess, you know, you can use her with Bennett as well. Next character is Tighnari, and I figured even though he's more elemental mastery scaling, I figured I'd include it because the Cinder City is decent, and he is one of the, I guess, top-ish, you know, attack scaling DPS characters. So for the first 3 charge shots, it does look like we're able to maintain over 42%, but it definitely drops off a cliff after that. Now, the next character is Wander, and at this point, I was really starting to run out of juice, so I couldn't bother testing with every single Constellation 6, every single team with Constellation 6 as well, but unfortunately, he's definitely falling far behind. In this team, I was using the Noblesse Oblige, although you can use the, for example, Cinder City to buff like Furina or Yelan's damage, or I guess Mavuika's damage if you have her on the team. But it's definitely a bit iffy there because, yeah, unfortunately, you can't swirl, so you can't activate the Anima buff on Cinder City for Wander. Now, the next character is the Raiden Shogun, and unfortunately, it appears that the Raiden Shogun has been skipping gym class. I think all she does is sit around in some funky area where no one really is. So she doesn't really move much, and on top of that, she actually stands still at the beginning of her burst for quite a while. So that means that you're definitely going to struggle when it comes to generating Night Soul points for Iansan with the Raiden Shogun, which isn't great. But at least you can trigger the Cinder City, and perhaps I'm not using her the best to optimize for that. Now, the next character is Alhaitham. Alhaitham, I guess, wouldn't really want to run Iansan, even though he is highly mobile, because what you can actually do, even though I think you lose 1 mirror by doing that, but you can do his elemental skill into the air into a plunge attack to get some major movement in order to actually kind of cap out Iansan's Night Soul points. However, the issue is that you are sacrificing Kuki Shinobu for this slot, and Kuki, well, you know, she also deals Hyper Bloom, or she does Hyper Bloom, which makes a huge difference, and you do kind of have to choose. You have some opportunity costs. So in this case, we played a pure aggravate team, which is okay, but overall Hyper Bloom for Constellation 0 Alhaitham tends to be the better choice. And finally, we have Navia, who is perhaps one of the last popular attack scaling characters on this list, and unfortunately, unless you use her in a plunge team, which A plunge team obviously will have no issue maintaining the stacks, but outside of a plunge team, it's not looking so good. You can see that Iansan's Night Soul points are very, very low, but the good news is that you can front load at least one elemental skill while Iansan's points are maxed, and for that matter, while her Constellation 6 is active. So let's take a look at a few additional parameters for Iansan. Now this chart here we can see is what combat attack stat does she need in order to max out the flat attack buff that she provides to her teammate. And for example, here she would need 3000 attack in order to actually cap out at level 13, assuming you have her Constellation 5. That is your attack stat after all the various attack buffs have happened in combat. And, you know, for example, that includes Iansan's Kick, which gives her 20%. This includes any Oblige a Bless buffs that might have happened, as well as, for example, Chevreuse, which gives up to 40%. So yeah, I'll show you guys how to check that in a bit, but kind of went on a tangent here. You can see here, these are the buffs that Iansan provides. And there we go, I had to fix a few typos there in the chart, but yeah, that's that. And now this is what we actually just went through. And this is actually what we just went through in terms of all the showcases for all the different characters. You can just see these are kind of my opinions and initial observations for the DPS characters that I tested her with. In Ayaka's case, I guess I didn't really mention that, yeah, Ayaka basically just snapshots it, making her a decent recipient of it, all things considered. And we have some other ones, you know, whether they're in great shape or not so great shape. And for Arlecchino, since the test didn't really change much between Constellation 4 minus Iansan and Constellation 4 plus, you know, I didn't include 2 rows for it. But we can see here for Clorinde as well as for Wriothesley, at least I felt like I noticed an improvement to their fitness rating here. And yeah, so maybe hopefully this chart will be helpful. And the next chart that I have here is the KICKulator. So this serves 2 purposes: whether or not you need to perform Iansan's Kick to give her 20% attack buff, and as well how much your characters will actually be buffed by Iansan if you're reaching those targets or not. Let's take a quick look at this chart. This is Iansan's attack stat out of combat. So we are not in combat right now. You can see that my current Iansan's attack stat is at 2,498. So we'll just punch that right in. Check her base attack, which is this number right here, 822. And now we input Iansan's Q talent level, which is 12. And we will be using Iansan's Kick. And we don't have Noblesse Oblige, we don't have Tenacity, we don't have Chevreuse's HP, which if you do have Chevreuse, you can put in, like, for example, 37,000. You can see this number go up. But in this case, we don't have Chevreuse HP. So yeah, and we don't have any other attack buffs that are specific to Iansan, which can happen, like, for example, passing her a TDO DS buff or something like that. And over here, we can see now that this is the anticipated attack buff for Iansan. She should be providing 718, which unfortunately is short of the 770. So next, let's actually take a look at the receiver's attack. In this case, we have Varesa at 2,240. So we'll punch that in. And Veresa's base attack is 1031, which we'll type right here. And finally, Varesa's Night Soul Burst gives her 35%. Normally it's at 0, but you can, in this case, put it at 35% for Varesa. And Varesa's attack after the buff should be 3,319, assuming I did everything right in this chart. So let's head on over to our Dorito friend. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And we're going to do Iansan Kick. Now switch over to Varesa, and we can see her attack now after Iansan's buff. Oh, actually, we also have Iansan's Constellation 2, which provides 30% attack. So we're going to have to punch that in too, but it's 3,990. And we also have 2 stacks on this passive because of her Night Soul Burst, as well as using Shieldin', so it is very easy to miss stuff. So plus 0.35 again. And there we go, just like that, 3,990. And that verifies, like, okay, it's one off because of rounding error, but you know, I can't really help that issue with the rounding error stuff. But yeah, so we can see that this does actually work if you are able to account for everything, including double Night Soul Burst. For, you know, you guys saw what I had to add here. Yeah, not sure why this the border here is like that. If any of you guys know how to fix that, let me know. Or alternatively, you can check right here very simply to see you can check Iansan's combat attack stat, which is here, 2,662. You just punch that in, And you can see that her buff that she'll provide is 770, which is short of the 770 max attack buff. Now, the absolute easiest way to actually check what Iansan's attack buff conversion is to literally just take the combat attack stat. So let's say you've done all your buffs and everything and Iansan is off field. Then you just go and you just simply multiply it by 0.27. And when you multiply it in this specific example, it would be a 674.5 attack buff, which definitely falls short of the 770 max attack buff. So yeah, this spreadsheet will be down in the comments below. I know it's not perfect, but at the very least, maybe it can help you guys optimize your builds for Iansan a little bit. The reason why I like this sheet specifically is because I don't have to keep testing against the enemy and keep kicking them and doing all this stuff. I can just punch it in here, adjust some artifacts to see, and then punch it in here to check whether or not she maxes out this buff or not. And in this case, for this build, we're gonna have to increase her attack some way or another in order to max out that attack buff. So yeah, as we can see, Iansan's buffs in particular definitely add a lot of quality of life, increasing this burst. And one other thing I didn't mention is that her Constellation 6 also increases her burst duration by 3 seconds. And this is actually very helpful for certain rotations where you might want to use Iansan before another character, before your DPS character, because it allows you to kind of shift the rotation for more flexibility there. And we also have this Constellation 4, which obviously helps her generate Night Soul points. Although for characters that already can't maintain over 54 Night Soul points for Iansan, this thing just kind of delays the inevitable, at which point they will tend to lose more points than they can gain to maintain that, even though it is very helpful. And we have our Constellation 2 as 30% attack, and finally Constellation 1, which I actually forgot to mention until now, just basically helps her recover energy, making it a pretty good constellation, alleviating a lot of her energy requirements. So yeah, overall, Iansan is definitely a great side grade for Bennett, and hopefully this helped you guys at least get some idea of, you know, what to kind of expect with Iansan, as well as what kind of performance upgrades or whatever it might be you can kind of look forward to or not. Let me know what you think about all this, and if this video was helpful in any way. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.